All already. So we're live again. It's been a while. I'm not sure who all's going to show up. If anybody. This was kind of a last minute thing, but such is life. I've got a virtual background up because my space is an even greater mess than it normally is. So you'll have to deal with the weird fringe around my head. Let's see. Looks like we have one person watching, whoever you are. Go ahead and chime in if you would. I'm sure other folks will trickle in as they realize that I'm streaming. Hopefully, if not, but mostly came on just to sort of touch bases again. Maybe even talk about a few things that have been going on in gaming in my life and in general. So yeah, it's just kind of I'm going to try and make it a little bit more gamey this time around than it was last time. Last time ended up being sort of a pretty decent conversation on mental health. But I think I don't want to beat that horse to death and then beyond. So, just to touch bases real quick on personal stuff. I mean, life seems to be getting a little bit better. Some progress in getting out and meeting people locally, which is cool. Feel my hobby energies coming back, so I've been slowly but surely working on stuff that is lower entry. It doesn't require too much of a push. So like I've been doing some adventure writing and the like. I'm going to be running my D&D campaign tonight, my 5th edition campaign, which continues. I'm actually in the process of making a character to get into my brother's weekly game, which I had always had an invitation to be in, but had avoided because it had been a kind of a push for me, and I wasn't feeling energized enough to make that push. But I feel like I really need to. Hey, Daniel. The game is in the middle of the work week, late at night, late-ish at night. I mean, they don't start usually till about 8:30 p.m., which is a bit of a rush for me. I get off work at 7:30, so that means like get off work, get ready to go out the door into their place, wherever the game is having. This is the other thing, the game floats. So for me, a person of habit who kind of likes to know what's going on and doesn't like a lot of variables, that floating nature is a little tricky because it means I always have to I can't like memorize the location that it's going to be at, and those locations become near or farther from me depending on where they are. But anyways, I've decided to sort of bite the bullet and jump in on that campaign. Anyways, just because I feel like I need the in-person, face-to-face at the table game experience. Not usually a player in games, so that's another thing that's nice to another nice thing for me. So that'll be cool. It's a little awkward though because the campaign is 9 levels in, and it's been going on for several years now, and is very rich. So I literally am coming into it knowing pretty much next to nothing about what's going on. And there's no way I'm going to be able to catch up and keep up, which is fine because my character also will have not known this information. So I'm actually reprising a character I had made earlier in the campaign, but then I decided to step out. So he'll be coming back as a familiar face to the party, so we won't have to go with that whole introduction thing again. But my confusion will be able to be reflected in the playing of my character because he will not know what's going on either. And so everything he knows will be coming from the other players, and their characters and the explanation of what's going on there. So that should be fun. It's been a lot. I'm a little behind on making that character because my brother is using an alternate system for 5e. He's using the A5e, Advanced 5e, the level up stuff, which is a great version of 5e that allows a little bit more customization. However, it's more steps in making a character. And so I've kind of had to, I guess I've been spoiled, not as a player, so I don't have to usually make characters, but also with 5e having such a robust online tool, when I have made characters in the past, it's been very simple. All the same steps, but it's all very much laid out there for you and very much not the sprawling set of books in front of you and fumbling through, or, in the digital realm, fumbling through different PDFs to try and get the information you need. So yeah, that should be interesting. I have been cobbling together, converting a figure for my wizard. It's several different Reaper Bones plastic figures going into one figure. So like the hat is off of one guy, the staff is off another. There's a big book with some quills on the back that is off of another guy. And then I've added a few bits of green stuff here and there to make it a little bit more whimsical and personal. And then also to tie in some of the kind of uglier joins on it. It'll get painted, but I enjoyed putting that together. Let's see, I'm still working on my classic counter-based, chit game. My sci-fi bunker assault sort of a game. That's still in the works. Got my sample counters made, and I've got all the sub-assembly rules, basically all the bits and pieces that will make up the game figured out. I just need to frame it in a set of rules, and then I can start playtesting it. So that'll be fun. Let me take a look. Actually, let me see if I can pull up that counter sheet so you can see what I'm working on. Not everybody is familiar with the old style counter sheets, but let me see here. So just a second here. Hey, Cody. Welcome. All right, so I'm going to try to pull this up and see if I can get it to show off. Because these are, I found a free tool that allows me to make custom counters. It's a bit limited in respect to the images that you can use, but yeah, there are enough to make it workable. And so what I've got here, this is just a quick little snippet blurb of the window itself. You can see that I've got lasers and rocket mortars and missile launchers, defense turrets, shriekers, ECM. These are the assets for the bunker itself. Acid fog, minefield counters. And some of these counters and stuff are going to change over time. The number sequences on here are, if I recall correctly off of memory, the to hit, the ammo, or basically the malfunction roll, and then this is the to hit on a d6, the malfunction roll, and then the number of hits it can take. So a laser, for example, hits on a 2+ on a die 6. it only fails. Excuse me. The malfunction roll is a rollover, and basically you have to keep functioning effectively. And these are, of course, up for iteration and interpretation. But yeah, that would be the counters for the game that I'm working on, at least for the playtest. And let's see, I have started doing some conversions for miniatures just for shits and giggles. I've got some terrain projects I want to work on. Like I mentioned, I'm kind of slowly but surely working my way back up to speed, hobby and gaming wise. Hey, Dirty History and Hobbies, how's it going? But no, so yeah, I'm revitalizing. I was talking to Jen the other day, and that's my wife, and was wondering if now that I live in a state with more pronounced seasons, if I'm getting hit with seasonal affective disorder in a way that I haven't in the past. So in Washington, it's just so consistently one way most of the year. I don't know if being born and raised there in the Northwest that I really register that. But here, where the seasons giveth and the seasons taketh away, it's a much more pronounced shift. So I'm wondering if now that I'm here in Missouri, where I can see those seasonal shifts, if it's affecting me a little bit more. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that. Let's see. There's been some interesting chatter going around that I always find amusing in terms of gaming. I know we went recently through the whole Wizards of the Coast reiterating humanoids in the monster manual and the big to do about nothing over that. This is gonna sound like I do. Gen Exile. I live. Yeah, I think coming from the Pacific Northwest, I think I feel the same way. And when it gets to be too hot, too consistently, and too bright, I just like Jen and I still celebrate when the weather is Washington-y around here, where it's just gray and drizzly. I love it. Hey, nerds. No, as far as my take on the humanoid question, because I'll hot take it now. Ooh, it's a controversy. And if you know me, this is sort of my mantra. D&D was never one way. It was never as cut and dry as either side of the argument always seems to think it is. New gamers have these weird misconceptions about what D&D was, but at the same time, the old school guys seem to have this weird idea of what D&D also was. And the thought that orcs and goblins and stuff were always just faceless piles of hit points to be slaughtered all the time wholesale. While fundamentally true, in that that's how they were presented in the books, in the monster manual, the actual way that they were used in the rules and in many of the modules, magazine articles, dungeons, third party and mainstream TSR really would refute that. We have reaction rolls when you have encounters in old school games, which could range from hostile through to neutral and then actually to friendly. So there are modules in which humanoids are written to be role played with, and the solutions for those modules often hem on finding a way to work with the humanoids, which really does throw off that idea that orcs, goblins, lizard men, ogres, all of those things were just there to be killed, and that they were faceless bad guys who were absolutely evil, and that putting them in some sort of weird space where they're treated more roundedly is somehow failing the game. It's just not really true. And so, like, all WotC did with the new book is just simply put them in a place that allows you to make them more useful in your games. So if you look at older monster descriptions, you'd have the base monster description in a monster book. And then if you read the description, you'd have all this other subtext talking about how, shamans are treated like this class, this class, this class. You're going to have leaders and sub-leaders that are this class and, treated like this class or this class. And the way that WotC is doing it now just really sidesteps that. It simply says that, basically humanoids are NPCs because you can kill an NPC and parties still do. So NPCs, putting them in the NPC section of the book, as opposed to just the straight up monster section of the book, does away with the need for all of that subtextual information. If an orc is now able to be a warrior, an adept, a champion, a bodyguard, or whatever other NPC profile you're applying it to, you really don't need all that subtext that was there. Well, subtext is probably not the right word, but that description text that would have filled out the orc listing and every other humanoid over and over and repeatedly so. This way you can have a description of how orcs function in general, and then you can leave it to the GM to figure out what is needed for that particular adventure. If in the adventure the orcs are just going to be faceless, speed bumps for the party, you can still use them that way. You just will use a very basic NPC profile for them, something like a guard or a warrior or a fighter or something like that. And if you need them to be more, they can be more. It's easy. What it is producing is options for GMs who want to play the game in different ways. It's not telling you how to play them. It's simply changing the framework to make them more versatile in ways that they were always used before. It's just that before they were presented in one way, and then over the evolution of the game, they changed to be used in different ways that sort of made their original presentation a little bit dated. And I think one of the things you got to remember with a lot of the D&D stuff, the early D&D stuff, is all that shit was just made up. Like, they hadn't worked it out. They hadn't play tested a lot of it. And a lot of it was really just developed and expanded upon and perfected through play over years and years and years of on-the-job training, for lack of a better term. Well, and that's the thing, a Nerd's Nerd is, it never was. There is not this platonic, perfect version of D&D, because even the creators of the game never played it the way it was written. The rules are written to make it presentable and marketable. And that's why almost every version of the game, and almost all role-playing games, period, although I don't think this is as common as it once was, always talked about, it's your game. Do with it what you want to. These are the rules as presented, but you should feel free to modify them and change them. And so you would have this very diverse spectrum of how people played D&D, just use it as an example. Yeah, and you're kind of on the same track here. So my early experience playing D&D was with the kids down the block. We were in a neighborhood, a suburban neighborhood, and the only interaction we had with other gamers, because we were young, we weren't old enough to go to conventions. Heck, I didn't even really know conventions existed until way later. Was when you might run into other groups at school, or like when you met a friend who had a friend from the neighborhood over, and he was a part of. So like my early gaming experience was 3 different gaming groups from 3 different neighborhoods who started to cross pollinate information, and then maybe you had a brother who was off college who came back, an adult gamer in your life. Maybe you had family or friends who had gone off to the military and played, and so they brought back. And so you had a very organic growth and exchange of ideas. And then maybe you had Dragon Magazine. And if you did, you probably only had a few issues now and again, because getting a consistent flow of Dragon was very tricky, because the circulation wasn't huge, and even if you had a shop that carried it locally, maybe you might not be able to get there before all of issue number whatever sold out. Did you have access to third-party materials, which would expand the idea sphere, that zeitgeist that you're working from? I early on had a lot of exposure to things like Judges Guild, and one of my favorites is the Mayfair Games Rolaids products, which I've been trying to recollect. And those gave a lot of different ideas as to how D&D could be shaped and played. The Rolaids Elves book presents an entirely new pantheon of elves. And while a lot of the cultural descriptions in there of elves are very similar to those that are presented in the various D&D books or Tolkien or anything like that, they are different also. So if you're me and you've got that book and you're integrating that book into your campaigns, your elves are very different than the elves in other people's games. Or somebody may just have pulled, a lot of us pulled from our favorite media. And so, the book you read, Asa, if you had a favorite book series, that probably made it into your game. Your favorite cartoon, the movies that you watched, if you loved Hawk the Slayer like I did, Hawk the Slayer was an influence. Dragon Slayer was an influence. Excalibur was an influence. I'm sure a lot of people's idea of a paladin, at least visually, was informed by that movie in the 80s. So this idea that we all played, there was a right way that D&D was supposed to be played, and that the concept of orcs as enemies was very distinct and succinct, is also fundamentally flawed, because again, if you're pulling from influences from other places besides D&D, other authors wrote about humanoid species and other non-human species that are out there in their worlds, and had given those creatures texture. And even if you want to go by Tolkien, even Tolkien hints at his orcs having a little bit more going on, but sort of being pressed into what they're doing by this undeniable evil overlord. There's the scene in the So, anyways, I don't want to make this whole stream about that, but yeah, that's my take on the whole WotC ruined orcs. No, they didn't. They just reframed them in a way that makes them more useful and less pigeonholed to one thing or another. Because I think WotC, especially with the 2024 edition, seems to be pulling back on the D&D is the Forgotten Realms and going into more of a D&D is whatever you make it, because they've seen that people who play 5th edition are all over the place as far as what they play. So trying to write a game that says that it is one way or the other is sort of a fail, especially when you're the biggest game on in the universe. Yeah, see, during History and Hobbies, you were there for the old lore as well, I'm sure, and you often had these eclectic groups of varying commitment to D&D, and various various points of reference for how they got into the hobby or into the genre, and it produced a very different world. If you really, really peel it back far enough, and I know GM Cody, who's in the chat here, can attest to this, the earliest versions of D&D were very DIY. Like, here's the basic game, but the DM is supposed to make his own dungeon. It's his world. It's his way or the highway. This is kind of how it all goes back. But even some of those earlier texts are talking about some of the earliest Dragon Magazine articles, or even Strategic Review articles, are on how to play different races that aren't in the main game. They're arguing the magic systems, and they're discussing whether or not the way that D&D is written is the only way or the right way. Okay, so interesting. Yeah. So that, anyways, that's my take on that. It's a big nothing burger. I feel like it's the usual rabble rousing for clicks. Is really what it seems to be anymore, because any amount of thought applied to it really dispels most of those arguments. And I assume so, but so yeah, it's just more silliness. I mean, ultimately, we all play these games the way that we want to, and we're supposed to play them the way that we want to, and that's really the only thing that matters. Just have fun, let other people have fun, and leave them alone. Nobody's hurting you by playing games their way at their table. But yeah, so let's see. What else do we got to talk about? I have been writing some more adventures. I've actually been working on my sword and sorcery level adventures, sort of the stuff that I was writing for By the Sword. So I might bring that campaign back more as a series of one-offs, not one-offs, but like short shots, sort of like, okay, we're going to play this adventure, take a break, come back, play this adventure. Much more serialized, sort of where maybe the same characters, or even maybe changing up some characters if the player base changes. Starting them at the adventure with maybe a bit of a background blurb, kind of like in the way that those old pulp stories were told anyways. There's not a lot written about what Conan was doing between Red Nails and the God in the Bull. There's not a lot that fills that in. He just shows up at one, and maybe you get in the introduction, or through the telling of the story, he'll flash back and do some retrospective thinking that will fill in the blanks. But I think you can play D&D easily that way and have it be perfectly fun. I think most people actually still sort of default to that, even though they might have pretense that they're doing it much more fluidly and organically. Really, what you're doing is running adventures and running campaigns. And then the downtime still comes down to a lot of just hand waving and narrative thinking, maybe some mechanics to set, depending on the system or the type of D&D you're playing, you might have training rules, or you might have research, or the players may tell you what they're going to do in their downtime, but you're very seldom playing out that downtime. Now, back in my day when I had nothing but time and I lived with other gamers, we had the luxury of spending a lot of time playing out just nonsensical bullshit. But that was because it was everyday gaming all the time. If we weren't working or going to school, we were gaming. So, and that was a house full of roommates who were all gamers. So it was like, the question wasn't, are we playing today? It's, what are we playing today? You'd wake up and there'd already be a table full of guys down in the game room, and you're like, dude, what are you guys playing? Rubbing your eyes, you try and wake up. Oh, we're playing Star Wars. Okay, let me go get my character. And here I come running down the stairs with a pair of sweatpants on my head so I can play my Twi'lek Swoop Racer. But, it's, that was fun. But very seldomly do we have that kind of time on our hands and that kind of easy, quick access to gaming. It's usually much more of a chore. So I'm going to do something here. I've got this blocked out to 11, but I will go past 11 if I need to, because currently I don't have therapy or anything on the books because my work completely changed our insurance this last time around. And so that threw all of my therapy and stuff up in the air, and I got to reestablish care and all of that. So, yay. So I'm going to, I see there are 12 people watching. I'm going to take questions. Go ahead and throw up your questions, whether they're personal questions or gaming questions, or we're going to count this as sort of an AMA kind of a thing. And go ahead and throw them up in the comments, and I will respond to them. I will star them in case I'm in the middle of answering one. Yeah, I mean, nobody has time for this anymore. Yeah, it happens. And I'm so hit or miss nowadays. I have a feeling that streams might be coming back more frequently as I have stuff to talk about. If I had been thinking about it, I would have grabbed my collection of Rolaids stuff so I could show off what I had been picking up. That could be next week. I really do need to get a setup to where I can do like a top down, so I can do painting, crafting, book flip throughs. But right now, the way things are arranged in my house, in my area here, it's really my desk and my desk camera, and that's it. I don't have like any kind of remote camera or anything like that. So if you have questions, hey geek, go ahead and put them in the comments. I will answer them to the best of my ability. But while I'm doing that, I'm just going to drink my water. And I'll hold music if it gets too boring. Oh. Favorite Rolaids supplement of the ones I've bought recently. Okay, so this is kind of a hard one. There's the nostalgia answer, and then there's the actual, like, what seems to be a better answer. So the Rolaids products, if you're not familiar with them, were a series of adventures and supplements put out by Mayfair. I know Geek knows them, but for those who may not know them, and they range from short, just adventures, to the supplements, which were usually a bunch of cultural information for whatever topic they were on, and usually they had subjects like elves, the dark folk, goblins, not goblins, but like dwarves, dragons, And then those would also have adventures in them. It is a toss up right now for the ones I've picked up between the Elves book, simply because that was such a favorite when I was a kid. I was the only person I knew who had it. And so it really was kind of a standout thing for my gaming. So my elves were very different. Um, but I have to say, the Dark Folk is a really good book because it covers a number of different humanoids and then gives a like layer maps and adventures and stuff for each of those. So very useful, and actually kind of dovetails into what I was just saying. So if goblins and orcs and everything are just something you're supposed to just blatantly kill, people sure spent a lot of time writing stuff, both in Dragon and in books like Dark Folk, to make them people. And the other thing too is to remember, people are horrible. So just because you're saying, orcs are people, lizard men are people, goblins are people, just remember how shitty people can be. So that doesn't really answer anything. All it does is actually it just makes it more complicated to kill them. And honestly, when has humanity ever really needed much to stand in the way of killing each other? So I mean, really, but yeah, I would say Dark Folk and Elves are both good. But the Dwarves book, I also picked up a copy of Dwarves. Recommend getting the second printing instead of the first printing. The second printing was much more robust and has a lot going on. The Dwarves book, really cool. It has so many like city and town maps in it that are useful. I finally got my first just straight adventure. It's a probably be considered kind of racially insensitive by today's standards because it's sort of a Fu Manchu sort of vibe. It's like the Dragons of Fei Lung or something like that, or Fei Sheng. I can't remember the name of the word. Yeah, I got it for a really good deal, so I just snatched it up. A lot of these books can run pretty high price, and I don't have, so I have to wait till I can snag them for a deal. But that one was the first adventure I got. So a relatively thin adventure, but it is all marked up with highlighter and stuff. So all my notes are already taken for me. And I'm not one of those purists who has to have like an untarnished version. So like all these Roll Aids books I've got, they've got very obvious wear, and I kind of prefer it that way. I have not seen this. That sounds very interesting, and I'm sure you just perked Cody's ears. Um, I don't know. Uh, hey, Celan. Um, no, I mean legit questions though about Rollates. But yeah, it's weird. There are so many things that I guess right now what I'm really doing with that is I'm picking up stuff that I was never able to get a hold of. Like of all of the Rollade stuff from back in the day, I only ever owned Elves and Ice Elves and the Treasures of Myth book, which is a really cool book because that's actually that's a good series of books. It takes magic items from real world folklore and mythology and gives them D&D stats. I only owned those three. I also then had access through one of my roommate friends, Dragons and Giants, and those ones he had picked up because those were actually written in partnership with Grenadier, and paralleled their signature lines of dragons and giants. So basically, when the books would cover the specific miniatures. So like if it was a chaos giant, there was stats for it in the giants book. So it's pretty cool. Well, I mean, it just sounds like he's playing his character. Yeah, it sounds pretty involved. I mean, and so if you mentioned it was done at MIT, so I mean, some of the nerdiest nerds that ever nerded are going to be there and doing that. How they have time to do all that while also studying at MIT, I don't know. But hey, uh, let's see. I tried painting miniatures again after a while, and I'm finding that I'm really needing to go back to basics on painting miniatures. My most recent attempts to paint have very much failed and left me feeling really sort of nonplussed about painting miniatures, which is bad considering I already hated the idea of paint. I'm a weird paradox, and I love miniatures, but I don't like painting miniatures. I would much rather sit around and convert, even sculpt entire miniatures, than paint them. So for me to pick up my brushes finally and go to paint stuff, um, and have it turn out so poorly was really a letdown, and definitely need to go back to basics. And I'm somebody who's taught other people how to paint, and those people have gone on to paint miniatures very well and enjoy it as a hobby. So it's not like I don't know how to paint. I just think I've like lost the plot somewhere and need to go back and reacquaint myself with the process. Uh, yeah, I mean, if you're at a school and on some sort of full ride, or your parents are paying for your school, or whatever, or you're on loans, whatever the case may be, sure, you're gonna have time. Exactly. Like, yeah, I love how painted miniatures look, but I'm not so obsessed with the idea. Like, I'm not one of those people who, like, I can't play with unpainted miniatures. If I had that philosophy, I would never play a game. But I would more so, I would much rather be playing with them than obsessing over painting them and waiting to paint them. Uh, because for me, one of the things that motivates me to paint miniatures and to build terrain and all of that is playing games. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for the longest time, I haven't had much motivation, because I don't have a regular miniatures outlet right now. Back before I moved and before COVID, we had regular gaming groups, and there was an outlet for that. So I was very prolific in painting those figures and painting figures back then. But yeah, I just definitely don't have it. No, go left. Uh, and if anybody wonders what this is about, that goes all the way back to a Star Wars campaign, um, where there was a Hujib named Flip, and they would say there was just randomly, the player who had the Hujib as a follower would say, "Flip says go left." So, as Hujibs communicate telepathically. Let's see. There are Sunday streams, maybe. I'm I'm revving back up. I love pulpy stuff. I actually love running like 1920s pulp adventure, or 1930s pulp adventure stuff as RPGs. Those are really fun. I know it's not Solomon Kane, but yeah. Yeah. If you obsess over painted miniatures, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You're ruining the game, the gaming part of the hobby for you. At that point, you are not a gamer; you're a hobbyist, and which is okay. I know plenty of people who are hobbyists, but yeah, if you would like to play games, then play games. Paint miniatures when you can, but play games. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, anything you do as a hobby should come down to what you actually enjoy. Um, and I think obsessing too much over the parts of it that you don't enjoy um, is generally bad for you. Um, I know, I probably should consume less YouTube content on painting and terrain crafting and stuff. The amount of that stuff that I have done and how freely I enjoyed it has decreased at about the same rate as my consumption of media demonstrating that stuff. I'm sure it's a combination of uh, various neurodivergent tendencies. I'm sure there's a little bit of that stuff feeding the imposter syndrome. It's basically seeing all those great results. And YouTube videos give this weird compression of time that makes it seem like these projects just happen quickly and instantly and magically and happily, even though I know better. And my brain maybe doesn't. And so that feeds that imposter syndrome because I can't reproduce that, or I worry that I can't reproduce that. But the other thing too is there's actually something to be said for the weird endorphin feed that you get from the parasocial aspects of it, or the peripheral aspects. I was reading a thing, for example, talking about how posting work in progress shots of projects you're working on for folks with ADHD, at least, can be bad for actually getting things done. So, because when you post that and get feedback from the work in progress, it's feeding your brain the dopamine that it's looking for. But the trickle that you get may get in the way of you finishing the project, which will ultimately give you a greater dopamine hit and be more substantial and lasting. But posting the work in progress shots can get in the way and actually lead to you not finishing projects, because they can also lead to you eventually having had enough dopamine from that particular subject matter and then needing to move on to the next thing before it's done. Because that's why ADHDers are jumping all over the place. They're looking for that next source of the brain chemicals that that normal people's brains produce on their own. And so, yeah, so sharing works in progress, but also engaging in media that feeds that part of your brain can be bad as well. So yeah, yeah, I definitely need to consume less how-to stuff, less DIY, and get back to DIYing the why. Because I know one of the pushes that really fueled my creativity before was figuring it out. So sitting down with a pile of materials and making something out of them and figuring out how to do it on my own definitely fueled that endorphin rush. And watching other people tell me how to do it takes that away. Yeah, the bad part is that a lot of times the thinking and the planning is all your brain needs. And that's the real big problem. I have so many piles of supplies because I think about it and I plan it and I get ready for doing it. And then my brain decides that, all right, we're satisfied. We did the thing. The worst thing that can happen to me, honestly, is where I can figure out how to do something before I actually get to doing it. Because if my brain can think through that whole process and that whole project to completion, sometimes that's enough to where I don't even have enough left to start it. What is also bad is being halfway through a project and my brain going, all right, we've got this. We know what we're doing. And then never coming back to it because it doesn't have any sort of push for it anymore. This is going to be on a per person basis because it doesn't do anything for me. I am perpetually surrounded by unfinished projects on my shelves. And that does nothing to motivate me to finish them. In my case, it actually feeds back on me and actually makes me feel bad about them and then ultimately avoid them. So I have contemplated removing my unfinished projects from my visible, from being visible to me, and putting them in boxes so I can later on discover them and go, and get excited because, this thing, I never finished it. And then I get back to it because seeing them every day, I think tweaks that imposter syndrome, and which then dovetails into the executive dysfunction. So let's see. So I think this is why playing games, for example, or having an active gaming group is good for getting projects done. Because when you're talking and with your friends and everybody else is getting excited about something, then there's definitely motivation to work on it and get it done. So you put them all away, and then as you stumble on them again, you get excited about working on them again. Well, that's good, because that was just a theory of mine. But this is turning into a mental health stream again. Who's got more hobby questions or more just dumb, stupid questions? Oh, let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go get those Rolex books. We got time. And I have returned. All right. So I'm going to do this just in real quick presentation form, but here's elves, actually. All right. As much as I dread to do this and show off my messy background, I'm going to remove the virtual background. Right. So here I am in my basement of shame. So that's the cover to elves. And let me just show how thick of a book it is. It's not thin. It's 96 pages. It's all black and white interior. A lot of wall of text, but there are lots of cool illustrations throughout. You got little maps and corners, but also in the back of the book, there are some full page maps, line art maps of various cities and kingdoms and the like. This last page has a section on elven relations with other races. It has some overview stuff of different characters. This is kind of cool, and I don't know if this was in my version that I had before, because I seem to recall my version having a much lighter background. Like I think my version had this color blue on the like on this book instead of this dark deep blue. But there's an introduction to the ElfQuest RPG in here, and I'm a huge fan of ElfQuest as a comic, and the RPG, which uses the Chaosium system. But yeah, so this is the Elves book. Definitely a solid must-have if you want cool, usable material for your games. This is the only one I have of my original collection. I still have the Fantastic Treasures. This is the one I was trying to remember the title for. And again, it's a relatively thick-ish book. It's about 90 some odd pages. It's got a very bad bend to it because it's been abused all over, and it sits on my shelf. But its interior is just one magic item after another, and they're all taken from mythology, folklore, religion. Like if I turn randomly here on this page, I have Carbuncle of Power, Cardia's Charm, Cassandra's Crown, Castle of Flowing Granite, Caswalan's Sword. So, just if it's in mythology and folklore, it's in there. And there's like 3 volumes of that. They also have a series of monster books that they did. Another one of the recent acquisitions is Dwarves. This is the second printing. This is the one I recommend. It is another 90 some odd page book. Similar format. Got couple of large maps in the back, black and white illustrations and text throughout. This one uses a different font than Elves, and I have a feeling that's because I think most of the text in here is from the first printing, which is a much earlier book for Rolaids. It has that very early early offset print, like barely out of the zine style printing. So I feel like there's a little bit of that left over in here, and that they just duplicated that same text style for the rest of the book. But yeah, this is really cool. Again, it's full of maps, full of characters. This one actually presents a series of pre-generated characters as well, which was interesting because all of these are also, each of these race source books is an adventure. You'll see at the top here, it says for Dwarven characters, skill levels 5 to 10. So this is like a mid-level campaign. And here's the big beefy boy, Dark Folk. Dark Folk is, well, actually not any bigger than the rest. It's only still 96 pages, but yeah, this is all about the humanoids. Front cover, back cover. Unlike the other two, the back cover also has cool art on it. Got some very nice old school orc style characters there. These are actually very much more what I think of when I think of as pig faced. You can see that they have a pig-ish face, but they're not literally pigs. But yeah, this book covers orcs, goblins, kobolds, gnolls, and trolls. So most of your regular hitters. Take a moment here. I'm not sure what the availability is going to be on that. It's being done as very much a celebratory sort of nostalgia thing, so I'm not sure how widely available it will be. But hopefully it at least has a small regular release. I don't know if they see a big enough demand for it to put it into regular release. This is very much in the category, I think, of what we are seeing a lot of right now, which is nostalgia grabs. TMNT is coming out with a new version that is effectively the same game but redone and a little modernized. We've seen all sorts of IPs that have been pulled out that are nostalgia grabs. Planet of the Apes, like that's a role playing game. I don't know. I hope so, but if it does come out, it'll probably be pretty limited. So this is the supplement to Elves. I like how they actually framed it's ice and then the actual title treatment of Elves. This is another one of the ones that I had when I was a kid, very influential in my gaming. It has the blue back cover. One really cool piece of art that I loved is this group of elves that are battling on the deck of one of the ice riggers. The ice riggers are exactly what they sound like. They're big ships that skip across the ice and snow. Some great full page black and white art. This one was interesting because, and I might have to pick up a second copy so I can do this, or just concede that I am not that guy. But it has a centerfold piece that is actually a pop out. It's cardstock, and it's done as a game screen for stats for ship-to-ship combat, and it has hex grid deck plans for a couple of ice riggers that are kind of in boarding. But yeah, this is definitely a cool one. The Ice Elves in here. One of my earliest characters of memory and one of my favorite characters from back in the day was Shagon Icehawk. He was an Ice Elf character inspired by this book. That character was a regular adventurer for a long time, and then when I ran into the third group of gamers that I ran into in my early days, he became part of their campaign, and that went into domain play, and he had a tragic end when betrayal left him and his army of ice elves stranded in the desert, succumbing to the elements. Very dramatic end to good old Shagon. Very healthy name, right? Into the Borderlands, as in the B2 book, like keep on the Borderlands. Oh, and here's what the racially like questionable by today's standards Dragons of Winged Sin. And this is 3 to 6 characters, levels 5 to 9. The blurb on the back says the Emperor has forbidden his subjects to enter the valley. Now mysterious storms and fantastic monsters have begun threatening the nearby countryside. The Emperor's word is law. None of his subjects must enter the valley, but a few chosen heroes from the distant west would be free to enter and brave the dragons in the Valley of the Orient's greatest wizard. Discover new and exciting challenges as your characters face the combined forces of nature and magic in 11th century China. Only then, after you've overcome all of the obstacles, can you meet the true lords of the elements. So I get a sneaking suspicion that this book was this came out in, where is it, 83. I have a feeling that this might have also been one of the ones that was released in conjunction with some of the Grenadier stuff, because Grenadier had an amazing celestial dragon model. It's freaking huge. It's like that big. Is that Ghost Rider as a wizard on the cover? No, that's a very Fu Manchu looking wizard doing some in a very Orientalist painting, which is like, hey, look, random Asian elements. Blackhead Studios, Jason, I would say if you really want inspiration for how to make your B2 campaign shine, check out Mage's Musings channel. He is running he has an ongoing B2 campaign that he details very well on that channel. The TLDR, the cliff notes on that is use it as a base. It is very basic because it was meant to be, but it is wide open for an advanced DM like you, who might have more experienced players to apply some layers over it. For example, the Caves of Chaos. No spoilers, I'm sure, for a 50-year-old module. Is a seemingly random collection of monsters, all living in close proximity and kind of at each other's throats in a set of caves. And the module itself doesn't really give much reason for there to be anything there. There is, however, a temple to Chaos, and in I think Chaos or the Death God or something, I can't remember off the top of my head, in those caves. So it is very easy to make a case that they're being gathered there, sort of Saruman style, as for some sort of other plan. But also remember, the area is big. It's centered in an area of wilderness, and so you can place all sorts of little side adventures anywhere in there and all over the place. That is what Sean over Mage's Musings has done with his campaign. He has essentially used it as a framework and let the players guide this sort of sandboxy campaign by seeding in plots for other modules that he drops in there that fit into the setting. He's got Castle Caldwell and Beyond is one of the ones he's used in there, and he's got a couple of other little modules that he's thrown in. So homebrew adventures and modules could easily be plugged into that one, and you'll get a lot of play out of it. The location makes a perfect jumping off point. When I remember back in the day when I ran it, we had Keep on the Borderlands was the frontier, but the next village back on the main road to the Borderlands, we had made the village of Hamlet. So when we played Keep on the Borderlands, we actually started the players at Village of Hamlet and then moved their way to the Borderlands to go to further adventure. But by the time they got to Keep on the Borderlands, they had sort of cut their teeth on Hamlet. Definitely use it as a framework. And if you have more advanced players who are going to kind of scratch their heads at why all these monsters are there, it's easy to come up with a reason. Throw an artifact or something in the caves that's drawing them there, evil, a hellmouth or something, or have it to where that temple, that church, that cult in there is the ones, are representatives of a higher power who are drawing them there. You can make it Bargle, the wizard that everybody hates. Curse you, Bargle. Hey, Tunkatod. So yeah, those were the Roll Aids books that I've got so far. I kind of cut my way through the low cost ones. Most of those were after shipping in the $20 to $30 range, but I'm now at the stage where I'm looking at ones that are going to be $20 to $30 before shipping, and those become a little bit slower to procure, or just having to bide my time. Not being overly concerned with condition is helpful. Like I mentioned on this one, it is marked up and full of notes. You can see there's highlighter all over in here, which I don't mind. This also has I do dig this for the maps. The one thing that's nice about these is they all have some really nice, clear maps that you could lift to use for other things. This map here is the Tower of Wing Sin, and it's a tower. It's a tower map. If you need a tower map, especially a Asian themed tower map, you could definitely use it. But the cool thing about it is that is sort of the rough. This is the kind of the rough all on one page reference map. But when you're running the adventure, and this is funny because they always talk about this as being such wonderful examples of modern design. Well, what is this? Mini maps on the individual pages where the adventure is going on. Look at that. These are all the same tower map. They're just much more detailed, giving you much more information per map as you're going through the adventure. Oh no, I have stressed out my central page and I had a page come loose. No, Hershey staple fails. Oh well. Yeah, so like, you know, that's one of the things that a lot of praise gets sung for in the modern OSR design. But it's interesting to see it in an old book that dates back to 1983. This seems to have been the golden age for Rolaids. Almost all of this stuff is dated 83. So yeah, they were cranking it out in 80. This is Dwarves. The second printing of Dwarves was in 82, but that doesn't surprise me because the first version of Dwarves, I think, is an older, one of their earlier books. Man, look at the curve on that one. It's yeah. But anyways, this is 84, and this is the first of the Fantastic Treasures. So they went on for several years. The Elves book, also 83. So yeah, 82, 83, 84. Definitely a good time for them. But yeah, I very much recommend the Rolaids books. They have lots of adventures. John, because I know you like to run this kind of stuff on your stream, they do have at least one, if not a couple, of solo adventures. So those are cool. I think one of them is the Pinnacle. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. No, it's not the Pinnacle. But yeah, so there are lots of little adventures, like adventures, and then there are the big source book ones. Of the big source book ones that I still have yet to get, I do want to get dragons and I do want to get giants. They have a one whole book on lizard men, which lizard men are one of my favorite old school humanoid enemies. They have, let's see, there's one for undead. There's one whole book for wizards, which I'd love to see what kind of new and interesting takes on old school wizards they had. So there's a lot of good material. I mean, they had a whole psionics book back in the day. So yeah, I'm actually. It's funny because somehow I missed that Rolaids was a Mayfair Games product line, and I bought other Mayfair games back in the day and played them. I just for some reason had missed that they were Mayfair games. I always knew them as the Rolaids books and thought that Rolaids was its own company. But that shows you how much or how little I paid attention back in the day. So, all right, so we are at 11:13. Any other questions in regard to stuff and things? And I'm definitely not out of steam yet. And yes, Bear, the cat dragged me in. Yeah. So let's see. But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever actually get to use any of those books, but it's nice to actually have them and read them when I wasn't able to back in the day when they came out. As a kid, I managed to simultaneously have a diverse amount of gaming products. A diverse amount isn't the word. I had a lot of diversity in the gaming products I had as far as where they came from, but I didn't have a lot of gaming products, which is why I'm such a homebrew guy. I think the single most unified chunk of D&D I ever had was the one year for Christmas where my parents had given me as a gift the entire run of the old Dragonlance Adventure modules, along with the Atlas of Krynn and um, one of the others. I think it was the Art of Dragonlance. Yeah, so they just did this big mega gift of all of that. So that was really cool. I don't have that anymore because unfortunately I went through a span in my life where I was like done and like sold off a bunch of my shit, which was stupid. So fucking stupid because I wish I had that stuff. But no, so I mean, it's nice to be able to go back and actually pick up the micro games. You heard me mention about the micro games. I'm very much enamored by that style of game. The fact that these tiny little games were so complete. If you're a war gamer, they're just these wonderful little, often very inspired games that are each one is different. I've been looking through them to see if there's like a unified mechanic that they're using, and it seems like other than at the very base elemental level, there's really not. So each of them seems to kind of be very much written as its own thing, and they're very experimental, and I love it. Cool. Well, the at least with the old ice stuff, and I don't know, I can't speak to spell law. Much like Rolaids, there are a lot of companies out there producing stuff that they knew would get used for D&D, and so I remember a lot of the ice stuff, at least the MERP stuff, having conversion rules to D&D in it. So it's always kind of cool. Because clearly they knew that D&D was the big dog, and there wasn't such a thing as an open gaming license back then. So, like, if you're reading through the Rolaids books, when you pick them up, you'll notice they're not using 100% D&D stats. They're using their own stats that are then equivalent words, to D&D mechanics. So instead of hit points, they have HTK, hits to kill. And you'll see other differences, but if you have a trained eye, D&D eye, you'll notice. Let me see it, for example. Let me pull out an example here. Look, it's the Elves book. All right, so if I open up the Elves book and I flip through here to try and find some stats. Okay, so here is the stats for an Ice Imp. Armor class 5, HTK 28, and then it gives a 48 plus 4 hit dice mechanic. Move 18 inches, attacks 3 or 1 magic ability, damage 1 to 4, 1 to 4, 1 to 6. So evidently it looks like it has a claw bite. Special, if a bite hits you on a 20, save versus poison or lose 4 points of strength for 1d12 turns. Damn. So I guess it's freezing you. It has a mini cone of cold that does 44 plus 4 damage with a range of 30 feet. Icy surface 10 foot radius with a range within a range of 120 feet. Those caught on the ice save on 1/4 of their dexterity to stay on their feet, and at 1/2 of their dexterity to get up. Roll save every round for 2d6 rounds. So that's kind of cool. They just threw in like a slippery ice mechanic right there. That's kind of cool. And then it can teleport with no error. Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, that is a straight monster description, with the difference being HTK instead of hit points. I find it funny that they felt the need to change hit points and do HTK, hits to kill, but they weren't bothered by armor class. That's an odd one. Because you'd think that, maybe there was you'd think if it was a terms thing that they might have a problem with it. It's kind of cool because in the back, they also give you a summary of Elven characteristics. It says, for easy reference, here is a list that translates the peculiar characteristics of elven life into game terms. It has a generic section, and then it goes by type of elves: wood elves, gray elves, dark elves, ice elves, demi elves. So it's interesting. The demi elves in here, the half elves. In this book, it's so funny now that I think about it. One of the big complaints about modern D&D is that things like tieflings have become like their own race, right? There's now a population of tieflings out there, when they were supposed to be sort of one-offs. In here, the demi-elves have become their own cultures. So they're the outcast half-elves have sort of created these bands of like sort of roving nomad type characters. So you have these actual like populations of half elves that they refer to as the demi elves. Then they have high elves. But no, I just very nicely put together. Each of these bigger books has a whole bunch of lore and then some adventure stuff and then nice little summaries. I will say this: the writing in these books does not seem to be codified. So reading each of these books is its own experience. So the layout, for example, in elves is different than the layout in dwarves. For example, dwarves does not have that summary at the back where it breaks down the individual cultures. But elves does, which I do and don't like. I mean, obviously, having some sort of unified, framework for the books makes it easier to reference. But at the same time, I do respect that having them written very individually, I think, is a way to preserve I don't know, the authorial voice, the creative intent behind each one. Each one is its own creation and therefore does not get tiresome or redundant. Also, some of the maps. I mean, I love this map of the Old Keep. Just love the very nicely rendered, very textured black and white grayscale map. That's in Dark Folk. So yeah, I mean, even when the names on these are often the same, like this one, like for example, in Dark Folk, each race was written by a different person, which is cool. So each race was somebody's vision, and you'll see the same names repeated throughout the different books in one way or another. Like Dwarves by Paul Karchig. And then Dark Folk was edited by Paul Karchig. So he was like the big guy, big brain. And he co-wrote Trolls. But also it should be Steve Morrison also co-wrote Trolls. I don't see a lot of one thing I will say, the names in these do not overlap with the D&D artists and writers. So Mayfair was its own little band. Yeah, see, Elves was looks to have been written by a couple, Sharon Fitzgerald Carr and Delbert Carr Jr. Editor was different on this one. And then if we go to Treasures and Fantastic Treasures, yeah, it has just a couple editors listed. It doesn't even have specific authors. So I'm wondering if this is one of those cases where these magic items just were submitted by a whole bunch of people in the office and then just sort of collectively edited by the group. Let's see, Dragons of Wing Shin. That was written by the same people who did the Elves book, the Cars. So Delbert and Sharon. And then Ice Elves, I'm gonna venture was probably written by Delbert and Sharon as well, but you never know. No, actually written by Bruce Humphrey. So this is while it dovetails into the Elves book, this is very much a specific adventure written with Ice Elves in mind. It also expands on the Ice Elves stuff, but it's a different author. So yeah, I mean, a very healthy and kind of collaborative group of folks there at Mayfair working on these Roll Age products, which I think it provides a nice level of texture and quality and variety. So I enjoy them, and this is I probably spent way more time on these than I planned to, but yeah, I had time to kill. All right. Anyways, not seeing any more questions coming through, or any comments coming through. We are at 11:30. I do not have anywhere specific to be, but do show 16 folks here. So one last call for any questions or specific comments that you would like me to respond to. Nerds Nerd, that mecha game is on near permanent hold. Excuse me. The scope of the finances required to get that to a playable state make it unattainable for me, and that basically killed any of my interest in working on it. I love the universe. I love the concepts I've come up with for it, but without the ability to get the models produced for it, it just can't be. So sad. So I've changed my tack on game design to more attainable game concepts. The micro games that I'm writing definitely more doable because everything is cardboard counters. They can be done as print to play. I am working and tinkering on a couple of DIY miniatures agnostic rules where you can similar to things like Barrett Wood and Space Weirdos and stuff like that, where you can just whatever miniatures you want to go buy, you can apply to this game. I mean, I could, but the concept, so the rules and miniature concept are so tied together that I don't know how I would release it. The only way I could see doing it with a release would be and it would still require art, would be to do like paper counters, paid up, print and play kind of counter type stuff. Because the scale at which the game was being developed was one that really you haven't seen in miniature rules for mecha. In mecha games, it's either hyper focused on the mecha, and so the mecha models are really big, and there are a few of them on the table, and any more than a few just bogs it all down. Or the mecha are really just stand-ins for fighters, and the focus is actually more on the ships. What I was looking for was something in between, where the focus was on the mecha, where spaceships became basically terrain on the tabletop, because space combat seldom has terrain anyways. But if you look at, like, I was very much informed by Gundam battles, but I didn't want to write Gundam. And so in Gundam, you see like spaceships are basically terrain. They're there to get blown up. They're there to dodge. And so the focus is still on the back end. So that's mine. So I was dealing with a very squadron level of mecha, where each of the miniatures would be a certain scale. So it's hard to just release rules without models for this, because ultimately people are then left hanging for what models to use. Yeah, I do love old black and white illustration. As glorious as some of the modern art is in modern game books, unfortunately, they don't leave a lot to the imagination. And I know that's sort of dumb sounding, but because a lot of the black and white illustrations from the past certainly presented the subject matter in very clear, very specific ways. I don't, maybe it's the nature of black and white where it still leaves enough to the imagination. The other thing too, I think about the modern versions of the artwork is that after so many years, the all of the creatures are just so dialed in. And I think back in the day, even within the same product range, even sometimes within the same book, the art, like an orc, might look 3 different ways in the same book, for example, just depending on the artist. And it really did allow, it provided fertilizer for the brain to really imagine and kind of fill in your own blanks. We can take a look and see what it is. I mean, what are the biggest problems? So here, in brief. So unless you can sculpt the miniatures yourself, you have to have an idea and then a clear concept and then an artist to do the final product. Art costs money. Miniatures cost money. And while I have a fertile imagination and I have all these great ideas for what these are, the mecha in this universe look like, the best I can manage is like a crude sketch and some notes. Which means that either I need to find an artist who can then clean those up, and then I could take those designs to a sculptor, or I need to find a sculptor who can interpret my designs. Now, I know a sculptor like that. I've worked with him before. Unfortunately, he costs money, and the cost of sculpting sculpts has gone way up from when I first got into it. I can find cheaper sculptors, I'm sure, but those cheaper sculptors are going to have to be handed basically a finished piece of concept art, and are generally going to only be able to, or will only be willing to, at their rates, work from that art. The sculptor I had worked with in the past was the sort of sculptor I could throw an idea at, talk with, and have finished product come out the other end. And he has such an insane love and knowledge of mecha that he was really high on my list for this project. Unfortunately, he's just unavailable. So that's really what's halting the project. Game mechanics are a completely different thing. I mean, I still haven't even solidified the mechanics for the game. But the work on the game is stopped because I don't have the motivation to work on it anymore because it's such an unattainable goal. And I had that thing framed out release wise, like how I would release the original release, how I would do the expansions. I wanted to actually release the game in a way that when it sat on your shelf, it looked like an OVA series. I was really very much thinking about doing the major releases in VHS cases. So it would look like an old, 80s, 90s anime OVA series. Or I guess, modern wise, I could make the books like manga sized. and that way, when it was sitting on your shelf, it would look like, like a manga series. Because I thought about even just the styling on it too, and in doing so, each release would sort of be like a next chapter in the story. So I could start with the core models and the main rules, which would be the base story. And then each further expansion would also come with some storyline and styling. So like you look at the cover, it would have the mecha there. But there's a lot of talent that has to go behind that costs money, and I just don't have a budget anymore. And Kickstarters don't work the way that they used to. It used to be that you could basically throw up a cocktail, napkin sketch of a project, not really figuratively, and have that turn into a successful Kickstarter. You really can't anymore. So, yeah. So, like I said, though, I'm not dead in the water. I am working on other projects. Just looking at shooting for more attainable miniatures, more attainable rules projects. There's a big market right now for indie press miniatures games that are miniatures agnostic. A lot of them being very DIY to build your own, kit bash your own kind of stuff. And those are much easier to work with because I don't have to provide or pay anybody to produce the miniatures. Most of the cost there comes in buying the miniatures in the first place to convert and kit bash and be able to demonstrate to players. Because in most of those games too, you don't even necessarily have like artwork. You have photos of models and terrain and stuff. I can build that stuff. If I need somebody to photograph it, I know people who can do it. I mean, I could probably do it, but it's not my skill set. Anywho, all right. I think I'm gonna call it here. I did enjoy streaming again today, so it was fun. Thank you everybody for coming on. We were up to like 16 or 19 people at one point. All good. And hopefully this will become a regular thing again. I don't know if it's going to be an every Sunday thing. Baby steps. I'm still building up steam, but I do appreciate everybody who came out. And have yourself a good rest of your weekend. And also, I do have my Discord. So the Elfbait Discord is still there, still alive and kicking. If you're not part of it, go ahead and join it. If you're on it and you're not participating, by all means do. The categories there are not for me specifically to post information on there. They're there for folks to talk about things. I've got all kinds of categories for miniatures and for RPGs, for general rants and rules discussions and for sharing ideas. I would love the Discord to become much more lively than it is. So by all means, use it and have fun. See you all later.